Okay, folks, good evening. Town clerk advises me we have a quorum, so we can undertake to take care of the town's business this evening. Thank you, and thank you all for joining us this evening, and let me welcome the viewers at home. I sometimes forget that we're on cable TV, and for those of you who could not make it here but want to become informed with respect to the issue, I'm glad that you're tuning in at home tonight and you can help follow the debate. Before we move to Article 1, I have a motion that we routinely handle to allow non-residents to speak. And while I'm on the topic, I want the folks sitting in the right, left, rear section up there to understand that that's where our non-voting individuals sit. So if you're not intending to vote this evening, you can stay there, but if you are intending to vote, I'd encourage you to move to another section so that your vote can count. As we know from our most recent election for the Select Board, every single vote can make a difference. Now, with respect to, prior to Article 1, I'm going to read the following motion. Move that the following non-residents and non-voting town officials and consultants to committees be allowed to speak during the course of this annual town meeting. Kevin Rudin, Principal Assessor; Suzanne Kutzka, Superintendent of Schools, Holliston Public Schools; Joanne Menard, Assistant Superintendent of Schools; Dan McLeod, Director of Technology, Holliston Public Schools; Travis Ahern, our Town Administrator; Chris Hymans, Treasurer Collector; Kathleen Buckley, Assistant Town Administrator, HR Director; Geeta Patel, Town Accountant; and Jay Talaman, the Town Council. Our bylaws require the town meeting vote to allow the non-residents to address the town meeting. The vote required is a majority. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, so voted. Now, with respect to evening's article, we have a single article that will be presented. I wanted to just outline for town meeting this evening the protocol that I had developed myself and had shared with the interested parties here, the Select Board, the School Committee, the FinCom, Town Clerk, and Mr. Talaman, our Town Council, who's here this evening. And my thinking was that I would call on our Town Administrator, Mr. Ahern, to give us a brief procedural overview. What brings us here this evening, what the matter is that will be voted on this evening, although I'm sure you all have a pretty good awareness of what's going to be voted on. What will be the consequence of effect of a no vote? What will be the consequence of a yes vote? If there is a yes vote, what will follow with respect to the scheduling of a town election and what will be presented to the voters at that time? And so I'm going to ask him to present that to us. I'm then going to read the article that you have and the suggested motion. If there's a second for that, I'm going to call on the school committee or their designee, whoever they designate, to make a single individual to make a presentation to us with respect to the article that's being presented this evening. Following that presentation, I'm going to call on the Select Board, one or two or three of the members, to tell us the position of the Select Board and what rationale, if any, they care to offer. And if their position is not unanimous, I'll offer an opportunity to one or more of the other Select Board members to state their position if it differs from the majority. I'm then going to call on the Finance Committee to share with us their view of the article, what vote, if any, they've taken for the recommendation or consideration. I'll then open it up for a further presentation and debate. We have a podium set up here in front of the school committee for their convenience, so they'll be in a position to respond to questions from citizens without having to go to the central rostrum. We're going to utilize the podium in the front of the building, front of the room, for citizens to speak. Those of you who haven't spoken before town meetings or have difficulty speaking publicly, I want you to understand that we're a user-friendly, consumer-friendly group. I encourage you to come up. Even if it's your first time doing so, you might find it less challenging than you might otherwise thought of. So come on up, and if you stammer a little bit, that's okay. We all do it at various times in life. So if you have something to say, we'd like to hear it. I had toyed with the idea, in order to ensure a fair and open debate, by having people queue up on the left and the right, those in favor to come down the right-hand side, those on the left, and go back and forth. But I think that the less cumbersome we make it, the better. If I have 3 or 4 or 5 individuals that speak in one point and I exempt in favor, then I'll call on some who have a differing view, so that the views of both sides, if there are both sides that form, are fairly and evenly dealt with. I think our rules require that speakers be limited to 10 minutes. Given the limited agenda that we have, I'm going to be flexible with that. If the school committee needs more than 10 minutes to explain their position on it, I'm going to allow them that latitude to do that. And if the Select Board and the FinCom want to take more than 10 minutes, then that's okay too. I'm going to allow the debate to continue. I don't want an early motion to bring it to closure, move the question, so to speak, until the issue's been fairly discussed. if I get the sense that it's been fairly discussed, during due latitude because of the importance of the matter we have this evening, then I will entertain a motion to move the question, and we'll then put the matter to a vote. Okay, so if that's okay with everybody, I'm going to call on Mr. Ahern, please, to give us a procedural overview of what's before us. Thank you. Mr. Ahern.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I get to do the boring stuff, make sure everybody understands the process here, and just go through those items. I think some of them will be reiterated, so I'll be quick. But if there's any questions, we have the moderator, town council here that can answer any questions if I'm unclear or if anything else comes up that I don't cover. I want to cover one thing before I get into the process, which is that we are piloting a new process this town meeting. We were intending it for October, but this presented an opportunity. So if anybody needs translation services, we have Google Chromebooks that are with IT. Chris Mayo and Priya are right there to give you a Chromebook. You can turn it on and select from 35 languages for closed captioning live to translate. If you were at home, you can go to HCAT's Facebook feed and turn on the translation services as well. This is something that we're continuing to progress with at town meeting. Thank you. And if people have issues or people have other suggestions, we're open to all those. We want to make town meeting as accessible as possible to all our residents. So with that, I'm just going to go through the process here, make sure everybody's clear. Some of this is written in the materials, and some of it, again, will come up in some of the presentations from the Select Board, FinCom, and School Committee. So the FY25 budget, the fiscal year budget, was approved at annual town meeting on May 13th. The FY25 budget is set to go into effect on July 1st through June 30th of 25, which is a municipality's fiscal year. The budget was approved in May and balanced under Proposition 2.5, which I'd like to give a quick primer on. A town's annual operating budget is restricted in growth on an annual basis by a mechanism called Proposition 2.5, which is legislation put in place in the 1980s that allows a municipal budget to grow, a municipal entity to grow its tax levy limit, which is the total amount that can be raised through taxation, by 2.5% over the prior year, plus new growth, which is new taxable property that's created, or additions to taxable property since the prior fiscal year. Shortly after this past May annual town meeting, the school committee reached a memorandum of agreement with the Holliston Federation of Teachers, or HFT, that is contingent on an operational override to the Proposition 2.5. An operational override allows the tax levy limit, otherwise restricted by Prop 2.5, to increase by an amount agreed to by the community and voted on as a ballot question at a local election. So here's the most important clarification I'm trying to make between the two separate mechanisms that we're talking about. A ballot question, which the Select Board has agreed to hold after Labor Day, but before September 15th for various reasons, at the school committee's request, is the mechanism to approve the override. I'll repeat that. The ballot question or election is the vote on the override itself. The warrant article in front of you this evening answers the question of what the funds can be used for if and only if the override ballot question passes at the local election. Given the timeline here for which the school committee chair can provide additional context, you are being asked this evening, if an override is approved in September, are you in favor of spending that money as described in the warrant? The warrant article is contingent on the override passing at the ballot. The override ballot question is not contingent on town meeting. I know that's a little convoluted, so I wanted to state it up here. It is also written in the materials. If there are additional questions as we're getting through the materials, please feel free to use town council, the moderator, or ask a question for anybody to respond to. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Travis. Okay, now, one other opening comment that I wanted to make to you. You've heard me say it at previous town meetings, and I take pride in the level of discourse that we have here at the Holliston town meeting. The topic that we present here this evening is likely to engender strong feelings both for and against from individual members of the community who have various views of it. And I just want to encourage you in your comments to be frank, to be direct. You can say what's on your mind, but say it, please, in a civilized fashion. In the interest of maintaining that measure of civility, please direct your comments to me rather than to individual members. If you have a question, we'll put it out there, but I take the position that unless it's proven otherwise, that the people appearing before this assembled multitude here are operating in good faith and should be treated with respect and the courtesy that they're entitled to. So let's have our discussion, but let's have it in a civilized fashion. Okay? Excuse me?
We have an issue.
What is it? Hold on 1 sec.
HCAT is having a Comcast issue, so if you're watching Comcast
I'm advised that there's a Comcast issue, so if you're watching us on Channel 6 at home, turn to Channel 9. Right, Liz? Yep. Great, thank you. Okay, let's move to Article 1. The article is entitled Supplemental FY 2025 Budget Appropriation Proposition 2.5 Override. Is sponsored by the Select Board. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of money from the tax levy for the purpose of supplementing the operating budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024 for certain departmental operating purposes and other expenses, said supplemental appropriation being contingent upon passage of a Proposition 2.5 ballot question for an operating override under Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C, of take any action relative thereto. The stated purpose is one for the school department. The recommended sum is $1,126,021. Number two, personnel bylaw chart town HR budget $44,345, and that will be explained in the course of the presentation this evening. The total contingent appropriations total $1,170,366. I'm advised that the Finance Committee recommends approval of the supplemental FY 2025 budget appropriation of $1,126,021 for the school budget and $44,345 for the HR budget, contingent upon passing of a future ballot question for an operational override 7-0, and we'll hear from the FinCom more directly about that later. The motion is moved that the town approve the supplemental FY 2025 budget appropriation from the tax levy of $1,126,021 for the school budget and $44,345 for the HR budget, contingent upon passing of a future ballot question for an operational override pursuant to Mass General Laws 59, Section 21C. Is there a second? I'll call on the school committee, strike that. The sponsor is from the Select Board. I'm going to call on the school committee if I could first, because even though it's sponsored by the Select Board, I think that the school committee is presented with a laboring order this evening, so I'll call on them first to make a presentation. Thank you. Mr. Alford.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Dan Alford, Chair of the School Committee, 315 High Street. So before we get started, there's going to be a lot of information, numbers, details in the presentation tonight. We have uploaded that to our website. So if you go to holliston.k12.ma.us and then click on the special town meeting section of the website, you can actually bring up this presentation and either follow along or look at some of the numbers in more detail if you'd like. All right, so Travis covered a lot of this, but just a couple things to start, since most of this has already been covered. I'd just like to say that, if there was any way that we could have avoided having to have this special town meeting, we would have. We understand this is not the ideal situation for anyone, but at the end of the day, and I hope you'll agree when I get to the end of the presentation, you'll agree that this is a good thing for Holliston. Well, there's a lot of confusion, and I think Travis clarified it. This is still the normal process. It's just that the normal process is embedded within the May town meeting, the May town election. So we're not doing anything different. It's just that anytime you'd have an override, just like we did last year with the sidewalks and the DPW, that was embedded in the warrant from the May town meeting. It was embedded in the May town election. Also to clarify, if this article fails tonight but then passes at the ballot, that will provide unused levy capacity that it could then be appropriated at a future date in really any way. So tonight is the night to sort of make our voices heard and hopefully appropriate the way that we've requested it, but not use the unused levy capacity. Okay. Just a little bit about the timeline. So this is the timeline of our negotiations with the HFT. So starting on November 6th, 2023, the Holliston School Committee and the Holliston Federation of Teachers met for 14 times over 28 hours before reaching the memorandum of agreement and signing it on May 20th, 2024. We met on November 6th, we met on November 29th, we met on December 11th, December 20th, January 10th, January 24th, February 12th, February 29th, March 11th, all with no agreement. We met on March 20th, no agreement. We met on April 3rd, we didn't reach a deal. April 18th was when the ballot was when approximately April 18th was when the clerk sent the town election ballots to be printed. At that point, we couldn't have done anything. We met again on April 25th. We didn't reach an agreement. On May 3rd, the warrant was finalized by the Select Board and the Finance Committee and was published. We held our town meeting on May 13th, and then met again on May 15th with the Federation at a date that had been decided weeks, if not months prior to that. We got close to an agreement on that date, agreed to meet again on the 20th, and we signed the agreement and then ratified it. Both parties ratified it on May 23rd. So that's the details of the background here of how we got to where we are today. Just to give a little bit of context, the last override was in 2010. Between the time that the Holliston School Committee requested the override on April 15th and the override vote was held was 40 days. Based upon the current timeline, it'll be 110 days. The community will have a lot of opportunity to figure things out, in fact, maybe too much. But there will be a lot of time for answering even more questions, and we're here to answer a ton of questions tonight, and we want to hope we get everyone comfortable tonight, but we have months to talk about it. And I get that there's summer months, and the last thing people want to think about is something like this, but we have a lot of time ahead of us, too, to continue this conversation. I know there's been a lot of talk about what we did and didn't say, and I think it is important, and I realize that people don't follow everything that goes on at school committee meetings, select board meetings, and finance committee meetings, but we did email out and send out numerous communications about where we were with bargaining and the fact that our our budget did not necessarily have the funding required to settle a contract with the teachers. We also made it very clear that we would be unwilling to go forward with an override without an agreement with the teachers. Okay, so now let's get into the brass tacks. The school committee is requesting, as part of this warrant article, additional funding of $1,126,021. If you start at the top, you'll see that personnel costs are about $2.1 million. Other operational costs are $500,000. Oh, sorry. There you go. All right. Special education costs are $922,000. We have added one position, which is a BCBA. We talked about that in May. And this also includes almost $400,000 of budget cuts. We have worked really hard to come up with a fiscally prudent budget. In May, town meeting appropriated $1.3 million. We're asking for the 1.1 as part of the process tonight, continuing on in the election. And then we also received $750,000 in supplemental funding, one-time funding, for special education costs that bring our gap to zero. And then you can see the budget drivers on the right. Those are after the cuts that we did. Just to remind everyone, the school committee has sharpened its pencils. We worked really hard to come up with a budget that we felt was fiscally responsible and was in line with what the taxpayers of this town were looking for us to do, which was to ensure that we were operating efficiently. We came into town meeting with that. We looked at additional things as we were considering the override cost. Ultimately, though, we felt like we had cut deep enough already that any more additional cuts would have negatively impacted student learning. And we were trying to avoid that at all costs.
How many people we got?
I swear I haven't been talking for 10 minutes.
People.
All right, let's talk about the details of the contract. Okay. So, for those that haven't seen yet, the contract details are as follows. We have negotiated an additional 15 minutes of increased time on increased instructional time starting in 25-26 for all schools but Placentino, and Placentino will receive 10 additional minutes. That works out to 540 hours over a child's K through 12 education, which is over half a year of additional instructional time. So K through 12, over half a year of additional instructional time. We've increased student monitoring language to increase student safety during period changes at the middle and high school. And we've created a collaboration between an admin and educators on a process to look at the Bell schedules, which is the sort of the day-to-day schedule within the high school and the middle school, to look at potential changes in those schedules, in that as well. Looking at the financials, we eliminated step 2 to increase and keep us highly competitive with other Metro West districts. Our cost of living adjustment is 4%, 3%, 3% over those 3 years, and then there's a $1,500 additional top step in 25, 26 to coincide with the increased instructional time. While not part of the contract, as we looked at what we were going to do with the 15 minutes, and we still haven't fully decided, and that's really the administration's decision along with the school committee. Well, we haven't figured out exactly how that's going to be implemented. We did know that we couldn't add it to the start of the day. We're not going to make Miller a 7:15 start time, and doing it at the end of the day would make Placentino get out even 10 minutes later, which would create a problem on the other end. So one of the solutions that's always been on the table for dealing with the start times has been increasing the number of buses and reducing the number of bus runs so that you could, I can't get it to go forward when I want, and then it goes back. So as we go forward with this, we're going to be looking at reducing the number of bus runs to 2 from 3, which will reduce the number of start times from 3 different start times across the district to 2, and allow Miller to start later and Placentino to start earlier. We're going to be working. We've consistently heard continuing feedback about this, and we're listening. That said, there's a lot of work to do on the nitty-gritty that has to be worked out for that, and so we're going to work very closely with the teachers, with the staff, with the parents, with the community on how that looks on actual implementation. We did present a 3-year budget that we believe to be fiscally responsible. It does show a gap in years 2 and 3. We believe we can fill that gap. There's some details of ways that we can fill that we can't get into now due to some contractual issues, but we're confident that we will not be here in 3 years or in 2 years or in 1 year seeking another override to pay for this contract. I just want to state that again. We believe, we're committed to ensuring that this request funds at least these 3 years, if not, and preferably, my preference would be much more. So this is this is on the town's website. This is something that the assessor put together. I appreciate it. I can't, because then I gotta just, anyway. So this is on the town's website. You can look at what it would mean to your individual household, but obviously the average impact, including the additional money for non-union personnel on the town side, is $201 for the average household in Holliston, and then you can see and calculate your own rate. Just quickly on tax relief programs, Holliston has, through the support of town meeting, participates in a number of tax relief programs for low-income households, veterans, 65-plus households, and maybe some others. And this includes a new program that was just signed into law by the governor in May. Please reach out to the assessor for more details, and I'm sure he's going to be providing more information. There was a Ask the Assessor in the Holliston Reporter that goes into a lot of great details about that. It's a phenomenal program. And so I'm hopeful that it helps a lot of people out. And I did it again a lot of times. I've never actually done this before. I sat over there for 11 years, and I always made sure Ken spoke. So looking at this, these charts are all in the one-pager that we handed out today, but here it is in color. If you look at our comparable neighboring districts, you'll see that our average class size is below the average for our peers. That's a good thing. You want less kids per student, per teacher. Our per pupil spending is at the absolute bottom of the chart of all of our peers. Our residential tax base is relatively high as a percent of total, and our average single-family tax bill is below the average and significantly below Hopkinton, and then obviously some of the more affluent communities. I know this one is something that that many people have been asking for, and so we put together some compensation comparables. And I'll just pause here for a minute. It is on the slides and on the internet, but I think what it shows is that we are very competitive, but we are not like overly competitive. We value the work that our teachers do. We're trying to compensate them for it, but at the same time, there are many communities that do pay more than us, and so it's. So just let everyone take a second to look at this if they haven't been able to bring it up on the phone. And I appreciate that it's a little bit convoluted, but just to give some context, the gray is plus or minus 2% from Holliston. The light green and light red are 2 to 7 or 8%, something like that. Then there's a darker color, which is up to, I believe, 15%, and then over 15% is the darkest colors. I think it's important also to realize that of these 15 communities, 10 of them are in their last year of the contract. And what does that mean? They're all going to be looking at what we're doing, and this chart will look much different if we looked at the 2026 numbers. We can't look at the 2026 numbers because we don't have them. There are only a few communities that we have them for, but those districts, this chart will look different in a year as we look forward. I've mainly gone over this, but one thing I just want to point out is that the average property value in property tax in Holliston pays for about 60% of the $16,000 we spend to educate a child for 1 year. So if you have 2 kids in the schools, that's $32,000. The average person is paying $10,000 on taxes, a little less. It takes a village, essentially, is what this says. We need everybody. And we understand that it's hard for some people, and we get that, we do. This was not an easy decision to come to the community and ask for this additional money. But it's really, really important. Just quickly as we get towards the conclusion, there have been a lot of override requests recently in Massachusetts. A lot of really big override requests. In fact, just on Tuesday, North Reading put to the voters a $10 million request, $1,700 per household. It lost. But that's, I mean, these are the needs of our communities. And that was not just schools, that was a whole town-wide effort. But I mean, look at what is happening in Franklin, our neighbor. They had a $550 average household override that failed last week, 2 weeks ago. They cut 40 teachers, or 40 staff. They gutted the arts. These are the situations that we could find ourselves in, because we will eventually need to settle a contract. This is contingent. If this fails, there will be no day one immediate actions that need to be taken, but we're still going to need to settle a contract, and contracts are being settled at around where we've settled this contract. We're not an outlier. So our request, along with the select board, is $201 average for the average taxpayer. The average in Massachusetts in 2025, for 2025, fiscal year 2025, has been $474. We're looking at 2.1% increase versus the average of 5.5%. We have worked really, really hard to keep this as fiscally conservative and minimalistic as possible to reduce the impact on all of you. So, some takeaways, but we've kind of covered it. Our override is 58% less than the average for the state. That's the 201 to 454. As a percent, we're 62% below. That's the 2.1% to sorry, 5.4%, I don't have it in front of me anymore. 53.8% of the 26 known overrides this year have passed, and there are 2 outstanding with Holliston's one of them, and I believe Norton is the other that we know about. The yes vote, not weighted for total votes, but has been about 54%. In conclusion, the request and these funds are going to improve the educational quality for your kids. 540 hours. If there's one number that I want people to leave here with other than 201, because everyone understands that's the most important number, right? But really what the most important number is 540 hours. More over a year, over half a year of additional educational time for a student K through 12. Additionally, the contract puts in place the collaborative process for looking at the high school schedule and potentially the middle school schedule. This has been something that the community, we've heard lots of feedback on, just concerns. It doesn't mean that it's going to change. It just means that we're going to put through a process that's going to go to take a deep dive into what it is and what the other options are, and whether we want to look at something to improve the schedule, or if it needs improving. It keeps Holliston's teachers competitively compensated and increases competitiveness in entry-level wages. So one thing, going back to that chart before, we are going to be paying significantly better for entry-level teachers, educators, and professionals. We're hoping that that will help us attract teachers and over time, and then retain them. Holliston needs to increase its investments in its schools to remain competitive. While Holliston School Committee is committed to a goal of increasing rigor and competitiveness while also ensuring opportunities for all. And as we've been talking about, the cost of this override is modest in comparison to other asks in the state, and it has been 14 years since we've last requested an override. The average of those overrides this year, the average time between overrides for those communities was 9 years. So lastly, this contract is good for teachers, good for teachers, good for students, good for the Holliston Public Schools, and good for Holliston. And I guess so thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate everyone showing up tonight.
Okay, Dan, thank you. I'll call on Ms. Hine to help us with respect to the Select Board's position on the article.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me back there? Thank you. Tina Hine, 142 Union Street, Chair of the Select Board. Welcome to town meeting, special town meeting, June 20th today, 2024. A quick word about how we arrived here tonight. 28 days ago, the Select Board was notified by the school committee of the need.
Not just me.
All set? We were notified 28 days ago by the school committee of the need for an override because of the just signed memorandum of agreement. Since May 24th, the work to open the warrant, align schedules, arrange necessary staff and volunteers has been impressive and time intensive. Many thanks are owed to our dedicated town hall employees. Many of them here tonight. Presented with a request for an override, triggered by a union contract that increases teacher pay, it was right and fair for the Select Board to revisit the growing pay disparity among non-union employees identified during the FY24 or fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 budget development processes. On June 5th, the Select Board voted to include a request to appropriate an additional $44,345 to mitigate the growing pay disparity. The salaries of 43 employees across a number of town departments were reviewed and compared to compensation for peers in neighborhood communities. The 1.5% cost of living adjustment in the fiscal years 2024 and 2025 has led to pay disparity, and the override presents an opportunity to address that by adding capacity. The Select Board asks town meeting to vote yes tonight to appropriate $44,345 for purpose 2 within the article. I'd like to take a moment to briefly review Select Board's support of the Holliston Public Schools during the current 3-year contract. This support includes advancing capital requests through the annual town meeting warrants, directing federal CARES ARPA dollars to the schools, and participating in the state's school building and repair program. The total approved capital requests during the fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2025, the year we're about to enter on July 1st, is $2,468,025. It includes areas of technology, buildings, curriculum, and classroom upgrades. From the $1.3 million in 2020 CARES dollars and the $4.5 million in 2021 ARPA funds, the Select Board voted to spend just over $2 million of those federal dollars to the schools. And in doing so, partnered with the Holliston Public Schools to accomplish a long overdue goal of offering free full-day kindergarten. Calls to significantly upgrade the high school have grown over the last few years, and the school committee and administration prioritize joining the state program each year to build and renovate public school buildings. The Select Board has authorized participation in that program on behalf of the town of Holliston since 2019. The enormity and expense of a high school build is built into the town's 5-year capital improvement plan and factors heavily in every discussion around townwide planning to improve infrastructure and buildings, including most recently the May 2023 debt exclusion decisions that were made here at town meeting for road and sidewalk improvements and a new DPW facility. As mentioned before, we look to call you back for a special election, a town election, on September 10th. The Select Board is yet to call the ballot. We're waiting for more information, including tonight's feedback and votes, but that is the intention, is to come back on the 10th of September for a ballot question for the override. I'd like to share some final thoughts. I share this information with you tonight from the prior slides to demonstrate that the town of Holliston supports the Holliston Public Schools. Over the past 3 years, the Select Board has brought forward every funding request made by the schools, and town meeting has approved each one. Holliston voters support the education of our children in every possible way. Throughout a global pandemic, by advancing their use of technology, by improving the physical environment in which they learn, and through the appropriation of tax dollars for educational supplies, materials, and teacher salaries. And I am confident that this will continue when the opportunity presents itself soon to fund a new school building. Tonight, town meeting is asked to appropriate additional money to the school and town department budgets for fiscal year 2025. Any vote tonight to do this will be contingent upon voters returning later this summer for an override, as has already been outlined at a local town election. Voters are presented with a request to build new capacity, raise additional revenue, and direct most of that new revenue towards the schools. As you look to vote on a $1.17 million override later this summer, recognize that we here at town meeting are the legislative body deciding how and where the money is spent. We just did this in May, passing a $72 million operational budget, of which $42 million went to the schools. It is a new contract negotiating in mid-May that brings us back tonight and will bring us back to the ballot box at the end of the summer. This moment in time calls for big picture thinking. Demographics in Holliston are changing. Our infrastructure must be maintained. Our residents, our neighbors, have growing and varying needs for town services, and challenges not known today will present themselves at any point. The past 3 years have made that very clear. And while new opportunities and growth exist for Holliston, capitalizing on those opportunities for the benefit of all residents is accomplished by the combined efforts and hard work of town departments and the employees who work in them. I remind town meeting that while the upcoming election determines the override, we are here tonight to decide how to balance the budget needs of every town department. When you vote tonight, know what those new tax dollars are going to. Service level decisions, education decisions, quality of life decisions are all determined by the balanced budgets established here at town meeting. Your vote here makes those decisions. I will end with an affirmation. We are here tonight because we support the Holliston Public Schools. We are also here because we recognize that a once-in-15-year request resulting in an operational override deserves thorough deliberation. I appeal to town meeting to bring forward your questions and comments as we consider the additional appropriation of $1.17 million in the fiscal year 2025 budget. Consider the many aspects of the decision before us. Recognize the complex demands for the revenue raised by property taxes and make informed choices about the educational system in Holliston. I look forward to your respectful and thoughtful deliberation we're about to hear this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tina. Mr. Sparrow wanted an opportunity to address us, so call on select board members. Mr. Sparrow.
Thank you. Ben Sparrow. I'm the Vice Chair of the Select Board at 9 Forest Park Drive. And first thing I wanted to say was I just wanted to give a big thank you to Bill Maher, our moderator, to Liz Greendale, the town clerk, Jay Tallerman, our town council, and Travis Ahern for the enormous amount of work that they did after town meeting to get ready for another town meeting. So I really want to say thank you to them for that. So I'm speaking up by myself here. I'm not necessarily speaking on behalf of the Select Board, but I just wanted to say a couple things. I'm not going to hit you with numbers. Lots of other people are going to do that and have done that. But one of the things I just wanted to reiterate and to make sure was clear is that the most important thing about this community are its people. And that goes for residents and the town employees. And I think it's really important that we ensure that we show our town employees kindness and respect. We want to make this town a better place, and they're part of this process. And one of the ways that we can show their kindness and respect to them is to ensure that their pay rates are competitive with other communities. Otherwise, we risk losing great people to other places. And I understand that this might be hard for some people, and there is some hardship when we're asking for increases to your property taxes, but just say it again, that the assessor's office are excellent. They'll answer your questions, and they're a resource. If you need to reach out, you can call them, you can visit them at Town Hall. And I've had numerous conversations with our principal assessor, Kevin Rudden, and he's fantastic, and he can answer any question that you have. So I really urge you to reach out to them if you have any questions about your tax bill. And make sure you do vote on September 10th when that comes up. The last election for the Select Board was decided by one vote. One. So your vote matters. Just keep that in mind. And these votes, Mr. Alfred brought up that the override votes can be very close. So make sure you come out and vote on September 10th. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from the FinCom. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Bill.
Yes.
Vin Murphy, 432 Norfolk Street. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee, so if you didn't know who I was. So I'll go through a couple of the slides. This is very short, but I just wanted to say, first thing, okay, the purpose of the article is, just to remind, but Travis said it, but I just want to reiterate, the purpose of what we're here to do tonight is only to use, say, if the override passes, where's the money going to be used? So it doesn't have any effect on the actual vote, doesn't affect the dollar amount, just how the money is going to be used. So if we don't do it now, we'd have to do it on sometime before September 15th. So this is why we chose to do it now. Next slide. So summary of the article, we've already spoken about everything, so I won't go into it, but the dollars to be allocated to the different wages, it's all listed on the back of the warrant article. We'll be doing that at the fall town meeting. So we don't have to get into it tonight. We just wanted to have one set amount to be allocated, assuming the override passes. Next, what did we do? We, being the Finance Committee, we went through the whole process, gave the third degree, we would say, to the school committee, asking, do they really need this money? All the things they're going to be using it for. Is it justified? As they're going to be using it for? How do we stand up against other schools regarding wages and other things? While it is a lot of money, we ultimately recommended, and you'll see in the warrant article, the passage of this. So, sorry, wait. And so, yep, unanimously recommended, it's the last thing, recommends its appropriation. Lastly, I just want to remind you, because I want to reiterate this so we don't get into a long debate, will only take effect if the override passes. This article is only amending the 2025 budget, the one we did in May. Lastly, voting for or against this article will have no impact on the override. So thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Okay, the motion having been made and seconded is now open for public debate. Who would like to be heard? It's not, is that possible? Huh? Mr. Blaze, you've rescued us from silence.
Mr. Moderator, I am speechless when we just say it's only 1.2 million. No questions. But I want to go back to what Mr. Ken Shader told us last month.
Huh?
He said to us
I'm sorry,
that...
identify us. I recognize you,
Oh.
Mr. Blaze. Tell us your name and address, sir, please.
Jack Blaze, 25 Mitchell Road, Holliston, Mass. 01746.
Thank you.
Mr. Ken Shader told us last month at town meeting that the excise tax was down. The revenue from the excise tax was down in Holliston. Yes, you did. Don't shake your head no. Okay. So
Mr.
now I go
Mr.
back to...
Mr. Blaze, please address your comments to me. Even if you're looking at Mr. Shader, address your comments to me, please.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yep.
So now I have several questions. What did the special town meeting cost and where the money come from? What does the special town election cost, Mr. Moderator? What is that? Do we have a slush fund? And my third question, Mr. Moderator, is if it's only 1.2 million out of 7, and if you remember, Mr. Moderator, last month there was not a question to ask about the school budget. The only thing you did, you thanked the superintendent from Keefe Tech for being here. No further questions. So my last question is, why can't each budget absorb the 1.2 million and not even go for this override?
Okay. Thank you. I'll get those questions answered for you. Travis, can you help us, or Liz, can you help us with the cost of this evening's meeting, the cost of the special election? And I think the third one's a rhetorical question. Why can't all the departments chip in to cover the cost of this? I'm not sure that we'll get that answer, but we'll see what we can do with it. Thank you, Mr. Blaze.
Okay, so the first question is on the cost of the special town meeting. So the select board did bring the town clerk to 2 select board meetings to discuss this with the school committee. And ultimately, the cost of this evening was quoted at about $600, which was within the remaining appropriation for FY24, which we are at the tail end of, 10 more days in FY24. So that was the special town meeting. The ballot, we went through quite a few scenarios. There are not a lot of good scenarios for the ballot because we have a primary on September 3rd. So there were a few numbers that were moved about depending on the choice that ended up being between the select board and the town clerk on what would be the ballot, which was discussed earlier to be chosen as September 10th. The estimates ranged between $10,000 and $17,000, the highest cost being if it had been tried to be on the same night as the primary ballot this fall, which is September 3rd. So the estimate is closer to $12,000 for the ballot to be held on September 10th. Where that money will come from is not entirely determined. The school committee has discussed their ability to cover the cost of that as the purpose for the ballot itself, though the Finance Committee and the school committee have not finalized that discussion. There were other questions after that, but those are the 2 I'll answer, and I'm happy to...
I think those 2 are fine, Travis. Thank you. I think the third question, as I understood it, was why can't the other municipal departments cough up the money, I guess, in plain English to fund this need? And Mr. Talman, as I understand it, town meeting at its recent action appropriated funds to various municipal departments for the expenditures for the upcoming fiscal year. As I understand the practice and the procedure, those departments are not free to simply cough up or decline to spend the funds for the allocated purpose. Those funds would have to be expended for the purpose for which they were appropriated, and so those town departments are not free to just forego the full appropriation and cough it up to cover this. Do I have that right?
That's correct, and I think mining down, even though, again, Jay Tallerman, Town Council, mining down a little bit deeper when it relates to a school budget, the school budget is more of a bottom line budget. So money gets moved around within that at the discretion of the school committee. Now, I don't know all the details of the particular contract here, but this doesn't affect the other departments, what you're voting on here today. That is locked in. Those line item budgets are set. Now, if this doesn't pass, there's still room for economy throughout the course of the year, but it's not related to what you're voting on tonight.
Great, thank you. I proceed to any further debate. Anybody else want to be heard? Yes? You know, you'll learn how I've recognized the failure of age of my eyesight. I was going to say, Craig, come on down, but I kept my mouth shut and just invited you down, so welcome.
Okay, I'm Barbara Peedy, 166 Union Street. I support the teachers, the schools, and the children of our town. The town supports the schools, admin, teachers, and students via community partnerships with youth and family services, public safety, fire and police, the DPW, Parks and Rec, and Human Resource Department. The town appropriates over 60% of our total budget for education, school department. The community approves the school budget year after year with little or no discussion at town meeting, even when it exceeds the budget guidelines given to the departments at the beginning of the budget season. Businesses donate goods and services to the many fundraisers that support students and teachers all year round, as do many residents. So clearly, we support the schools. I'm presuming during negotiations that the school committee advised the union of the award deadline for the annual town meeting in May. When they missed that deadline, why the rush and push a week after town meeting that we need an override? This special town meeting tonight and possible ballot has created extra work and expenses for the town. This is irresponsible of the school committee and the HFT. No. This is from people who stood up and said 8 weeks is not enough time to evaluate a change that had no financial impact to the town, and who states in town meeting, we are not asking for an override, and then a week later says we need an override and must have a special town meeting. With that 4-week notice, we are supposed to determine if a $1.1 million override should pass. Evaluating the teacher pay schedules from other towns and ours shows that our teachers are paid similarly to other towns. Some of the wealthier towns do pay more, but many others pay less. For example, Ashland, who as of 2023 had an average salary that was almost $2,700 less than Holliston teachers. And I mention this because we keep hearing that Ashland passed an override to give the teachers 3% raises over the next 3 years. Perhaps that will bring us up to our teachers' pay. At any rate, teachers' pay, Holliston teachers' pay are competitive. If there are problems in the schools, throwing money at the teachers changes nothing. The school committee has not clearly communicated nor demonstrated how this contract is good for the students, teachers, and the town. Questions such as, what are the positive outcomes for students in year 1? Positive outcomes for the town and teachers besides more money. What are the positive outcomes for the students in year 2? 15 instructional minutes. What is the plan for that, and what does it look like? What are the positive outcomes for students in year 3? Positive outcomes for the town. What are the positive outcomes for the teachers beside more money for top step teachers? And what does additional scheduling flexibility while maintaining overall teacher preparation time, increased monitoring at the middle and high school mean and look like now with this contract? What are the benefits to the students? Are they not monitored in the hallway now? What are the benefits for the town? Because of questions like these and many more, I propose we indefinitely postpone this article until the school committee provides more detailed information about the need for an override.
Now, Ms. Petey, before you leave, the motion that I have, the copy of the motion that you presented to me indicated that you moved to indefinitely postpone the article until October town meeting. Is that what your motion is? Because you
Yes.
just yes, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So the motion as presented to me in writing is move to indefinitely postpone the article until October town meeting, giving the school committee time to explain in detail why they approved a contract that the town could not afford. That motion is in order, requires a second. Is there a second? Second. Okay, I'm sorry, yes, Jay? Oh, okay.
You can definitely postpone or refer it for study,
Okay.
but you can't postpone it to a specific time.
Ms. Petey, the town council, who trumps me, indicates that your motion is in order, with the exception of that point, that if you indefinitely postpone, it's indefinitely postponed. You can't indefinitely postpone it to the October meeting. So I'd have your permission to amend, to strike until the October town meeting from your motion to indefinitely postpone? Okay, so I'll make that change. So we'll read indefinitely postpone the article, giving the school committee time to explain in detail why they approved a contract that the town could not afford. There is a second. It's open for discussion. Anybody want to be heard either in favor or against the motion to indefinitely postpone? Yes? FinCom? Ms. Zima?
Michelle Zemer, 583 Winter Street. Excuse me. I just wanted to remind everyone that this article concerns appropriating money if the ballot passes, the override passes on September 10th. So the timeline isn't today we make the decision on the override. Dan in his presentation has already said that between now and that election, there are going to be times for a discussion, I guess maybe public forums, things like that. So you'll have plenty of time between now and September 10th to discuss an override, discuss all the issues that were mentioned. But now is not the time. Now we're discussing appropriating the money if the override passes. Just wanted to remind everyone.
Thank you. Sir, in the FinCom, did you want to be heard further? You all set? Yeah. Okay, any further discussion? Yes? This is on the motion to indefinitely postpone, right? Yeah, thank you.
Ben Sweeney, 115 Meadowbrook Lane. So I want to urge everyone to vote against that motion because I think our teachers need our support. They need it now.
Great. Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, seeing none, we'll move to a vote on the motion to indefinitely postpone. We'll do it on a voice vote, and if I'm in doubt, then we'll do a hand count. So all those in favor of indefinite postponement, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, all right, so that fails. Let's move to further discussion. Move to further discussion on the underlying motion. Yes? I should say the main motion rather than the underlying motion.
J. Leary, 146 Karen Circle, Holliston. Couple of things, if maybe the school committee, Mr. Moderator, if you would ask them for me, It's being said that this override is for $1.1 million for teacher contracts. A couple of questions I have is, A, is that 1.1 million, will that fund the entirety of the contract? In other words, the 433 that was apparently negotiated after town meeting, number one. Number two, it also goes on in the school committee comments continued section to say, in addition to funding the teacher contract, it's requesting for money for additional buses. Yeah, I think you mentioned that, but I'd like to see what the breakdown is, like what is going toward the teacher contract, what is going toward the buses, and then something that I was kind of surprised to see is that it's also going for maintenance. That doesn't seem to be part of the additional. I don't imagine that when that contract was negotiated, maintenance was part of that contract there. So if we could get a breakdown on funding for the teachers, funding for the buses, and then the maintenance that apparently has been deferred over some time. And my first question, which will the entirety of the number handle all 3 years of that contract? Thank you.
Mr. Alford, you want to defer that to somebody else, or are you ready for it?
I'm wondering.
Okay, good. There you go.
So Jay, well, Mr. Moderator?
Yeah, good. Yeah, sure.
Yes, this will cover the entirety of the contract, so that's just the starters. As far as the breakdown goes, about 800,000 is for the teachers, 200,000 for buses, and 100,000 for other salaries. In year one, so because the buses kick in year two, we are going to do some additional maintenance in year one-time increase in maintenance, and so that's why that's part of this. But the buses so the maintenance and the buses are basically the same money, just in different years.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. Thank you, takes a village. The one in the center, if you don't mind, please just identify yourself. Thank you.
Allison Quinnen, 37 Pilgrim Road. I just first want to say that I don't think that the bar graphs in this handout are particularly representative of where Holliston, how it matches up, because all the towns listed are different. And the comparison of Holliston's override ask on the bottom of this first page, we don't know what the other towns were asking for. We don't know what the other overrides were asking for, so I don't think it's a terribly useful chart. I'm wondering if the school committee can tell us what other towns have negotiated contracts with a 4% increase in the first year and 3% in subsequent years. Thank you.
Mr. Alford?
So Franklin is in the third year of a 444. Ashland did a 333, but with significant increases in longevity. And Framingham just did a 233.5. However, the top step teachers in the second year and third year will receive an additional 2%. So for them, it's a 255.5.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
One more.
Okay, let's go ahead. Just hold on one sec. Thank you.
Wayland did a 433.
Thank you. The middle one, please. Thank you.
Hi there, Sarah Baru, 21 Fawn Road. I really appreciated Ms. Petey's questions that she raised, although we're not postponing it indefinitely. I would love to know from the school committee, when are we going to get the answers to those questions? I know the summer months are here, so we have between now and September 10th. I really want more details as to what this is going to look like, how those 15 minutes are going to be used across the schools. I'm wondering if you can tell us when we will have the chance, specific meetings, specific open office hours, to get that information before September 10th. Thank you.
So I believe we answered a lot of the questions in the presentation that Ms. Petey posed. As far as the use of the added instructional time, I mean, that is something that we're working on. I'm not sure we will have definitive answers for you by September 10th, but Dr. Cosby, I don't know if you want to sort of elaborate on your thinking. But there will be lots of community conversations and discussions about plans as we move forward. We are going to be open and as transparent as possible with all this stuff.
We're going to hear from our school superintendent, Dr. Kutzka.
Susan Kutzka, Superintendent of Schools. I do want to say I strongly support this contract for our teachers. Our teachers work incredibly hard for our students each and every day. I was surprised when I came to Holliston that we were one of 31 districts in the Commonwealth that did not have free full-day kindergarten. So we conquered that through ARPA funds and then appropriating that in the budget, and I'm happy to say that's an equitable opportunity to improve literacy for our students. While I can't speak exactly how the minutes are going to play out, one of the things I hear often when we're planning curriculum for teachers is it's so hard to fit all of the work that we have to do in for our students. We have multiple standards, content standards, the math state standards that we are required and obligated to teach for our students to provide equity and compare in a global world that they're prepared for. And in order to do so, they need the time to do that. So how can we help our teachers get all of that work done without increasing the length of the day? I truly believe over time this is going to make a huge difference for students. We've invested capital funds this year, going into the next year, for math curriculum resources. It surprised me that we had not done a curriculum review in math since 2011, which means we are sorely behind in giving hands-on resources to our teachers that we needed for a number of years. So I'm very excited. We're spending a ton of PD time next year supporting our teachers, implementing an entirely new curriculum resource, K-12, for math for all students. That's going to take a tremendous amount of time, a lot of work for our teachers, and then to give the best opportunity to equitable outcome for students and academic rigor, we need that extra time in our day for students. So it will definitely equate to instructional minutes, time on learning for students. You know, one of the things that I've heard also through social media, even though I don't watch Facebook feeds, I do get feedback from people. And one of the things I hear is that our students also need social emotional learning. We've invested a ton of time in that, and we're embedding that in our instructional day as well. And then why are we not giving them more free time and play time? Well, I have to say, having taught myself for 15 years, and I have a sister-in-law as a teacher, my daughter is a teacher, my niece is starting college this fall for teacher, so I am a huge supporter and lover of all teachers, being one myself. We need this for our children, we need this for our community. Our students in our elementary schools, just because it's come up before, they get 55 minutes for lunch and recess. That's a large amount of time, and 30 minutes is a long lunch time for children, and I would like to give them more recess time, but I don't think that's what our students need. I do think the time on learning is essential to grow our community, to give the best opportunity for students, and I think this is a huge step in the right direction at a time when we're expecting a lot from our teachers. They're taking on new learning, and that's going to be going right back to our students with this extra time as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Yes? Take your time now.
Hi, Melissa Doucette, 768 Winter Street, and I've got 4 children in the public school system. One going into 4th, 2 going into 5th, and 1 going into 7th grade. And I just want to say that the teachers that my children have done a phenomenal job. I've had 3 of them on IEPs at different times. Right now, 2 of them are on IEPs. Our special education services that my kids have received have been phenomenal. They have grown in literacy and learning. We had schools that were in school for elementary during COVID when other districts were not. I also grew up in Holliston. I lived in the house I grew up in, so, you know, everybody's always talked about how great Holliston public school systems are, but that's not the chatter I'm hearing lately. I'm hearing that Ashland might be better. I'm hearing that Hopkinton might be better. I'm hearing people saying they wish maybe they got their house in Hopkinton because the schools were better a while ago. What I want to say is that our teachers are doing a good job, and I want to appropriately compensate our teachers for the hard work that they do. I have 4 at home. Sometimes I have a hard time managing those 4. I don't know about the teachers when they manage 20 or 18. I don't even know the class sizes now. It's probably more than that. We need our teachers. We need our paraprofessionals in the schools. I have one that has a dedicated para, and that is what is helping him be successful in his learning, in his social emotional learning, and his growing. So I'm in support of a contract for our teachers that pays them adequately and fairly, as well as paraprofessionals, and doing what we can to support the schools. And I know it's a big number. I know there are questions, but I do think that we have elected our members on the school committee because those are who we voted for. So I trust that they've done their due diligence in the budget process to get things where they need to be. And I believe they're going to answer any of the detailed questions that people might have. I'm a numbers person. I'm a finance manager at commissions, so I can understand wanting to know the nitty-gritty details. So I'm sure those will get answered. So I want to, just encourage everybody to vote for this budget so our teachers can have a contract and to be adequately compensated. And I do just want to point out, I think a few years ago, our teachers were without a contract for a while. Is that true? Yeah. So I don't want that to happen again. I want our teachers to feel like this town supports them and is willing to pay them for what they are worth. And they're worth more than that because honestly, teachers become like classrooms become little families. And I entrust my 4 kids to the schools every day. And they're doing an amazing job, and I want them to continue to do an amazing job. And I would hate to have the amazing teachers that my kids have had leave and go to a different district, and then some new incoming child doesn't get to have that wonderful teacher because they had to go somewhere else. So, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm now satisfied that the motion has been fairly debated. I'll entertain a motion. To a second? All those in favor of moving the question say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Okay, we'll move to a vote on the main motion. I'll read it, although just for purposes of the record. The motion is move that the town approve the supplemental FY 2025 budget appropriation from the tax levy of $1,126,021 for the school budget and $44,345 for the HR budget, contingent upon passing of a future ballot question for an operational override pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 21C. The motion having been made and seconded, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? So voted. Just for the record, I heard maybe 2 to 3 no votes. The balance voted favorably, so that article passes. Okay. Motion to adjourn made by Mr. Alford. Before I call for a second on it, I do want to thank, in particular, Travis Ahern, Liz Greendale, Jay Tallerman for the support they gave all of us in putting this together tonight, and for the Select Board and the FinCom for their constructive input, and for Mr. Alford and the Finance, and the School Committee for the manner in which they assisted us in scheduling things of that matter. So thank you. Is there a second to the motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So voted. Thank you and good evening.